Chapter 4. A Dream. A Wish. Madame Monet and Oliver had been a good starting point for the investigation. Oliver's perspective didn't provide any definite solutions or many answers. He wasn't sure exactly when the forgetting happened, no more than she was. And he hadn't noticed any other odd things about his mother. He was worried about what would happen when his father did return, uncertain if either of them would be too disappointed to face each other when meeting again didn't return her memories. She wasn't a different person without her memories of Monsieur Monet, but she wasn't the exact same either. His concern for his mother made August all the more eager to figure out what was happening. Oliver had told them Blaise lived near the center of town, on the ground floor of a building that had been divided into separate living quarters on each floor. The door was shut, but bright scents of honey and fruit wafted into the street through the open shutters. August knocked on the wall beside one of them. Blaise was one of the only people in town who knew who August truly was. After decades as a guard in the royal city, they had retired to Fresnes when August was still young. Blaise had always been discreet when it came to August and his family, and had even joined father on a hunt or two ages ago. August could still remember the way their eyes had crinkled when restrained laughter when he had tripped up introducing himself once. "Hello!" Blaise, sprightly and small, with a bun of white hair wobbling at the top of their head, beckoned them inside with a wide, crooked smile. "Your new faces." August was about to reintroduce himself and Martin when Blaise narrowed their eyes on him. "Not new," they muttered, and leaned in close. "I didn't expect to see royalty today." "You haven't. I'm just August today, and I'm a little surprised you recognize me still," he said, smiling. "We're here on behalf of the royal court to investigate the memory loss." "I would have been a poor guard if I didn't recognize you," they said, and pointed at a table. "Sit. I took up bread making since leaving my post, but I'm guessing Joanne did most of the eating, because we haven't been spending much time together lately, and I've got bread piling up in every corner." Pickard refused to take any of my hands. Before either of them could protest, they were all seated at the table with rose-hip tea and jam on slightly too dense bread. The jam was good. The bread would not put the old baker Monsieur Pickard out of business any time soon. Blaise turned away to remove a pot from the small fire burning in the fireplace. "Thank you for talking to us," August said, trying to get the last chewy piece of bread from his teeth without Blaise seeing. "So, your friend Joanne is the one you forgot?" Starting with that would hopefully ease them into the questions. "Joanne Barton is a person-shaped hole in my memories." Blaise wiped the floor from their hands and picked up a ring with an arrowhead on it. "Joanne told me we got matching ones of these since we retired around the same time, and that I used to wear mine every day. I remember why I wear it, but not that it's part of a pair. You know, I would almost think—" Blaise shook their head and shrugged. "Could you walk us through the day you forgot?" August asked, so they didn't have to linger on whatever thought had stopped them. "Include even the smallest of details." They nodded, and Martin pulled out his notes. "I woke up early. I hadn't done any baking in a while, so I figured I'd spend the day doing that. Couldn't get my damned ring off and flung it under the table," Blaise said, laughing hollowly. "So I'm scrambling on the floor, still only in a nightshirt. And then the stranger came swanning into the room. I shrieked and knocked my head on the table. Not hard enough to do any damage, mind you. And she laughed like it was a joke. I asked her what she was doing. She said she was there for breakfast. I asked again who she was. After a bit of back and forth, she introduced herself as Joan and asked if I knew about some people in town losing their memories. I realized then what she was getting at. I don't know about you, but if I make a beautiful woman cry before dawn, I start questioning my life. 3 people lost their memories before me, and sure, the first time most of us thought it was a fluke, but 3 is hard to argue with." What happened the day before you forgot Madame Barton? We had dinner together the night before, according to her, but if anything special happened, she didn't tell me. Both Blaze's and Madame Monette's memory loss had occurred on the same sort of nondescript day, and neither had done anything out of the ordinary beforehand. Would Madame Barton be willing to talk to us? Asked August, reading Martin's notes over his shoulder. Blaze hesitated. She's a bit put out by it all. We've been friends for years. She's been helping, you know, but I don't blame her for needing a break. I lost her, and in a way, she lost me too. August swallowed. Each conversation was dragging him down into the depths of unfathomable despair. There were still 3 others left to speak with, which he would do without complaint. But his heart ached with each new revelation. No one should have to suffer through this. I'm sorry, August said. He rose and Martin followed his lead. We'll be staying at the inn. If you remember anything else that might be important, you can find us there. Blaze wouldn't let them leave without a basket of rolls, and August tore into one as they began their way back to the inn. Food often helped him think better. Oh, these are good, he said, through a mouthful, pleasantly surprised. Martin sighed and shook his head. Focus. August didn't know what to make of the memory loss. He couldn't figure out why anyone would want to cause memory loss, or what someone could do that would even cause it. Most of what we investigate, no matter how odd, usually ends up being motivated by greed. More money, power, or prestige. I don't see how making people forget someone could result in any of those, said Martin, checking his watch. Of course, the other motivator is love. August glanced around. Despite the time of the day, no one was outside. If this was intentional, then we need to talk to the others to see why, said August. If someone did want one of these people to forget whom they loved, it will be hard to find out who was the target and who was collateral. From what they had discussed with Madame Monette and Blaze, neither had any enemies, spurned lovers, or rivals. Martin scowled and hesitated as they neared the inn. We're no closer to knowing what's happening than we were yesterday. Martin, we got here a few hours ago. Of course we don't know anything yet, said August, holding open the door to the inn for him. Don't let anyone from Fresno know that, though. August didn't want to make people worry more. Blanche was on her way out, waving goodbye to the lone girl working, and she stopped them in the doorway. Henry is on his way, along with Monsieur Siegel, the person Lucy Renaud forgot. Lucy is refusing to talk to you, so he's as good as you're going to get for now, said Blanche, looking a bit harried. Is everything all right? August asked, noticing her worried expression. Someone's saying there's a monstrous cat on the outskirts of town, so I'm going to deal with that. Do you need our help with this cat? August asked. It sounded interesting and solvable, which would be fantastic for morale. No, sit. Let Mary know if you need anything, she said, and slipped past them, probably some puffed-up mouser. The pair sat at a table in the far corner. The server Mary brought them bowls of garlic and leek soup and wished them luck, and August set the rolls from Blaze on the table. He peeled the crust from his bread and dunked it in his soup. Martin placed their notes between them. Your stomach is a void, I swear, Martin said without any malice, and picked at his own food. It must have been nice to see Ella today. August narrowed his eyes at Martin. Yes, it was. I remember you writing to her every week for years, until you stopped talking about your mysterious little recipient to get all together, Martin said. Whenever I brought it up, you would even get that little twitch under your eye like you're getting now. I still don't know why she stopped writing me, if that's what you're getting at, August mumbled. She's still reticent. You always get verbose when you're nervous. August hated frowning so much, but he couldn't help it. Martin, the oldest of 4 siblings, and kind despite his sarcastic exterior, would want to fix whatever had gone wrong between August and Ella, and August wasn't sure outside help would be useful. Martin had already taken on August as a misplaced younger brother. August adored it, except for all the times it made him feel foolish. If he failed to rekindle his friendship with her, he didn't want a witness. Martin looked around before whispering, "And you never told her you were the prince?" August shook his head. "No one knows." It never felt good lying, but his father and mother had explained it to him as more like playing pretend. That had made sense to him as a child, and he liked the way Ella and the other people in town treated him as if he were normal. It was a feeling he never got in the city, but now that he was older, his deception felt heavier. "Are you sure you have no idea why she stopped writing?" Martin asked. August hadn't hidden his letters from his peers at school, and Martin had been privy to August's reaction when the letters had trickled off years ago. "We grew apart, that's all." Martin made a face, and before August could defend himself, the door to the inn opened. A young man in a sharp black uniform, one hand clutching his hat and the other a cane, hesitated in the doorway. August didn't recognize him, but he nodded to August and Martin and made his way over to them. He looked a few years older than August, stood taller than lanky Martin, and was drenched in freckles despite his pallor. Up close, his clothes looked to be those of a valet and were lovingly cared for. Even the buttons had been shined recently. He made his way to their table. "Sorry, you're the pair the court sent, yes?" Blanche said they would be here, said the man, and August nodded. "Oh, good. I'm Henry Horrocks." August offered him a seat and pushed his finished meal away. "August, this is Martin. Thank you for coming so quickly." "Oh, once everyone knew why I needed to leave, they were happy to pick up the work left behind," he said, taking a seat and leaning his cane against the table's edge. The silver grip was in the shape of a wolf's head. "Blanche said you're leaving in 5 days, though. That means Danielle probably won't be able to speak with you. She's a lady's maid, and her lady is visiting a friend." "That's fine." Martin flipped to a clean page in his book. "You're the first person who lost their memories. Could you describe what the day was like for you?" "I fell down the stairs and hurt my leg one day. I came back to work a week or so after the fall, and had no idea who Danielle was. We worked in the same household at the time. She was a maid, and I was a footman. We assumed the memory loss had something to do with the fall." "What was your relationship like with Danielle before the fall?" "Well, we worked together, of course, but between you and me, by the sounds of it, I was carrying a torch for her before forgetting her. She's kind and serious, and she says I used to never look her in the eye, so I'm guessing I was afraid I would blush and give it away." Henry prodded his cheek. "I go red as poppies. Completely embarrassing." "It's not embarrassing at all," said August, smiling. "So, you believed you liked her romantically?" "I think, but it's not like I can say for certain," Henry said, and shrugged. "The memory loss was bad, even when it was only me and no one knew it would become all this. But it brought us together. Danielle and I became friends because we talked so often after I forgot her. We wouldn't be married if not for this, so it's not been all bad." "And to think, all you had to do was talk to her," said August slightly. Henry chuckled. "True, but it was sort of like meeting her for the first time, which helped." They spoke briefly of what he remembered from the time around the memory loss, and August tried to find any similarities between Henry and Danielle when compared to the others. There was the obvious overlap since they all lived in Fresno, but nothing stood out to him. "You know, I thought relearning to walk was going to be the largest obstacle that year. My friends had Natalie make this for me," Henry said, taking his cane. He stared at the wolf head grip. "Then I forgot Danielle," he smiled sadly. "Turned out getting to know her again was a blessing." They spoke for a few more minutes, August probing for any clues and discovering nothing. Henry Horrocks wished them luck as he rose to leave. "We might need it," said August, watching Henry leave. Do you know what worries me?" "Nothing as much as it should," muttered Martin. Usually, August would have taken the bait, but he was actually worried about this memory loss. If this was a targeted attack, then why did the perpetrator wait so long between them? August asked. "This has been going on for years, with the shortest time between memory loss events being months. And why is the timeline accelerating now? August thought back over Madame Monet, Blaise Julien, and Henry Horrocks. If someone was profiting socially or romantically, August couldn't tell how. None of the three had reported making new connections except Henry, and that was with Danielle. Random and completely unprompted, Martin flipped through his notes on Henry. Who's Natalie? And Pickard. Blaise mentioned a Pickard. Natalie's a merchant, I think, but I never met her, and Monsieur Pickard's a baker. He's lived in Fresnes for ages, said August. It's a small town. I imagine all of them spoke to the same people. Martin nodded, opening and shutting his pocket watch in a steady rhythm. Monsieur Siegel is on the way. Perhaps the perspective of someone who was forgotten will shed new light on things. Soon enough, an older man stomped into the room. His clothes were worn and patched, and when he turned to August's table, there was a glint of gold in his scowl. He dragged a distant chair to their table, despite there being two empty ones nearby. Where do you want to start? He asked, offering no greeting or preamble. Monsieur Siegel? August asked. The man had the air of someone who thought breathing was a waste of time. Your neighbor, Madame Renaud, forgot you? The man sniffed, mouth twisting up. Thought Blanche sent you a letter. She did? She did. You did not read it? Asked Monsieur Siegel. He sighed and laid his hands on the table, continuing before August could answer. She's lonely, frustrating too. Used to come talk to me day in and day out, and for the life of me, I've got no idea why. She's sunny as a summer day and chatter than songbirds. I knew that the morning she didn't come calling that something was wrong. August glanced sideways at Martin. Do you know what she was doing the day before she forgot you? You know, I could put up with a lot of chatter. She's interesting most of the time, he said, and pulled out a pair of leather gloves. But she started this new thing, gifting me all sorts of nonsense and not accepting anything in return a while back. Don't understand it, so I don't care for it. The day before she forgot me, she catches me on the road and gives me a pair of leather gloves. Said she noticed mine were worn out. No wonder why she bothered. No idea why she bothered. I could buy my own gloves. From the corner of his sight, August saw Martin make a face and resisted the urge to laugh. Has she ever been married? Asked August. Does she have family or friends? No, and no idea why not. It's just her now. Monsieur Siegel shook his head like she was the most frustrating person he had ever encountered. She left a little bit after giving me the gloves. Seemed disappointed, but I was in the middle of fixing a post. No time to talk. Last time she stopped to talk at me while I was working, I knocked my thumbnail off with the hammer. Don't know what she did for the rest of that day, but the next day she didn't come by. Knew something was wrong. He threw the gloves on the table, but his frown didn't seem like anger at Madame Renaud. August would have said the older man was disappointed if he didn't think Monsieur Siegel would scoff at the idea. She doesn't believe a word I say. Smarts, to be honest, he said. Now, you got questions? A few, if you don't mind, August said. He huffed. If I did, I wouldn't be here. Bless you. August ran through the questions they had asked everyone else. Though there were a few blanks since Madame Renaud thought everyone was lying, the memory loss had almost certainly happened overnight, and she had no memory of her new neighbor, even when others insisted they had been living next to each other for over 15 years. Monsieur Siegel had insisted he was pleased she wasn't bothering him anymore, but once admitted missing their chats. He couldn't stand the gifting. Used to drink and complain about everyone else in town once it got dark, you know, he said. Do miss that. She would have told me if she met anyone new or was doing anything. Monsieur Siegel left with a little pump as when he arrived. The gloves he gave to them, claiming they only reminded him of the memory loss now. With him gone, they were the only two around, and August whistled. Do you think he'd figured out if she proposed? August asked. Martin looked over the gloves and pocketed them. He would probably assume it was only for tax reasons. So we agree that there's a pattern? Asked August. He's obtuse, but likes her well enough, and she definitely was flirting. Spouse, friend, co-worker, and neighbor. So far, Blaise and Madame Bardin were the only outlier, but the others all had some sort of romance in common. Blaise did refer to Madame Bardin as a beautiful woman. Perhaps there's something there, August said. Fair point, Martin agreed. Exactly, said August. I'll go see if Monsieur Allard is home, and you can organize our notes and look over the information from Blanche we didn't read thoroughly yet. See if there's anything interesting in there. We should turn in soon. Anyway, so you could get ready for bed without me around. The light in the inn was starting to dim, and August suspected that if people were as skittish at night as they were during the day, then everyone would turn in as soon as possible. Sounds good, Martin stood and gathered up all the notes. The travel this morning did my mind no favors. The words are starting to swim together. August grabbed an orange from the inn's kitchen. He dug his nails into the pith as he walked, enjoying the sharp bite its scent added to the air. Monsieur Allard, a cobbler from Fresnes and the surrounding area, had already closed up shop. The shutters over the upper floor windows were drawn too. August half turned, raising a sliver of orange to his mouth. A flash of gold hair caught his eyes. Ella, at the far end of the road, caught sight of him and startled. August kept his head down and pretended he hadn't seen her. She turned on her heel and took a side path between two buildings. August frowned. Was she avoiding him? After walking around the other side of the building, August emerged on the other road and peered down it. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over town, but Ella's silhouette was unmistakable. She was hurrying toward him with her head bowed. She hadn't seen him yet. August started walking down the street, keeping her in the corner of his sight, and she finally saw him. Ella hurried down another side road and out of sight. He bristled. She was avoiding him. August ripped another section from the orange to redirect his displeasure, uncertain as to how he would explain his circuitous path. August backtracked and cut her off in front of Monsieur Allard's house. She froze at the sight of him. Ella? He asked softly. Her head jerked up, and for a brief moment she frowned. Then she schooled her expression. You saw me, didn't you? Asked Ella. Immediately. He held out an orange slice and smiled when she took it. She seemed embarrassed more than upset. I was hoping to speak with Monsieur Allard, but he's in for the night, and then the dying light glimmered in your hair. She snorted. Did it now? I needed to see Monsieur Allard too. He's been embellishing a pair of Lady Tremaine's boots and repairing some other shoes for the family. How is your investigation going? Slowly. Ella peeled the thin skin from this orange slice with her nails, and August noticed soot under their edges. Let me walk you back to the road, and you can get your new shoes tomorrow, he said, and glanced down at hers. But she took a few steps that kept them out of sight under her dress. I can't believe Monsieur Allard is still working. I know. I think he's made every pair of shoes I've ever owned. She ate the orange slowly, an expression of pure bliss wrinkling across her face, and sighed. Thank you for this. Of course, he said. How was the rest of your evening? Fine. She offered up no more information. August tried to think of a safe topic of conversation and landed on Madame Monet and Oliver. She clearly liked the woman, and maybe she would let slip why she had seemed anxious about crossing paths with Oliver earlier. Sometimes melting a layer of ice was easier with cool water, not boiling. How long have you known Madame Monet? She was very nice, and Oliver seemed all right, he said. Have you known him for a long time, too? They moved to Fresnes when Oliver was younger, and we met around then, Ella said, nose crinkling as she thought about it. The whole family is lovely, and it's so rare anyone moves here, and I get to meet new people. Oliver took over some of his mother's lessons, as you know, so I see him more now since he's tutoring my stepsisters. He's been very worried about his parents, though. I don't even want to imagine what that sort of stress is like. I've been making sure his favorite tea is available during lessons, but I'm not sure he's even noticed. Kind and responsible. He was happy to see that part of her had not changed. Well, I hope Martin and I can do something to ease his worry, August said. Perfect, she said, because I've never known him to be so tense. And what about you? Are you doing much embroidery these days? He asked. Sewing was a safe topic. She loved it. That marigold on your waist isn't ribbon embroidery, is it? You used to go through endless thread and fabric when relaxing. Oh, yes, quite often, actually. It's probably my favorite part of the day, even if part of it is work. She lit up, smiling and swishing her skirt to show off the small yellow flower at her waist. It had been a bit of a chore recently, because while Natalie has many good qualities, identifying well-made fabric is not one of them. Drizella was getting a new dress made for this dinner a while ago, and the fabric was so... Well, I ended up hiding how it pleated with some ribbons. If I didn't know Natalie better, I would have assumed she did it on purpose, but I've seen some of the things Drizella likes. She does not have her mother's good taste. The tone was off, as if Ella wanted to say more but couldn't, and she scrunched up her nose. Lady Tremaine did choose your father, August offered. Ella hummed. And he chose her. That's what I always come back to. My father married her because he thought she would be a good mother to me. There was something about those words that hooked into his mind, but he couldn't figure out what it was. It made him think of their letters. Was it hard to suddenly have a stepmother and two new sisters? He asked, and touched her arm. I remember how excited you were to meet them, and then how anxious. How are they now? Trying, she said. It's good they're putting in the effort, he said, if not a bit late. Ella stared up at him through her lashes and shook her head. You're still too nice for your own good. You know, Martin says the same thing, and I don't want to say you're both wrong, but if the shoe fits... He shrugged. Really, Ella, how are they? Families are complicated, and my stepsisters lost their father when they were quite young. We're not a perfect family, but we are family, she said softly, and looked up at the sky. The first stars of the night were beginning to twinkle above them. Lady Tremaine is trying to prepare Drizella and Anastasia for their first season, and it is difficult. Lady Tremaine's been quite on edge. What about your debut? He asked. Not to brag, but I had a wonderful dance tutor as a child, and her son was my dance partner. He was quite good, if I recall. She smiled at him, and he was struck by a blurry memory, the warmth of her hand on his shoulder and weight on her feet atop his as they cheated. I'm taking a bit of a break from studying. I'll be fine. Everyone has to help out. I'm doing that by helping run the estate. It's far more interesting to actually run an estate than to simply listen to someone talk about how to do it. But that doesn't really answer the question. What about your debut? He asked. When we were children, you were so excited to fall in love and have a family. She flushed and muttered, Managing an estate doesn't make me unmarriable. Of course not, sorry, he said quickly. I just mean, what are your sisters doing to help? My stepsisters will help out by marrying upstanding young gentlemen, or the prince. Every girl dreams of marrying into royalty, I think. He cringed at the mention of the prince, and she elbowed him. Rude, she said, but she was grinning. You don't even know them. Do you dream of marrying the prince? He asked, and instantly regretted it. What if she hated him? Worse, what if she didn't? Oh yes, fairy tales, dreams, wishes. That's the point of them all, isn't it? She asked, sighing. She touched his arm. They give us hope that one day all of our problems will be solved, and our hard work will have been worth it. And the answer to all your problems is the prince? He asked, painfully aware of her fingers gently curled around his forearm. Ella had been by his side during his worst moments, and she didn't know he was the prince. Maybe he was the answer to some of her problems. Don't be ridiculous, she said quickly, but her glance at him was bright with fondness. Hope is the answer. That's what the prince represents. Oh, My mistake. Well, he could still solve that one if she ever asked. August? Ella tightened her grip on his arm. It's difficult to see you now, educated and working, successful in all the ways you wanted to be, and I'm still here. Just Ella. Just Ella? He laughed, because the statement was too ridiculous not to balk at. You've never been just anyone. She shook her head, and he swallowed, pulling the collar up on his shirt to hide the blush creeping down his neck. I went to school, yes, and I do work for the royal court, but the things I have actually accomplished are raindrops in the ocean, and that's with all the advantages I had to make going to school and working easier, he said, spinning to face her. You haven't even scratched the surface of all my faults. She rolled her eyes. I'm not asking you to bear your failings. I'm only saying that I have no accomplishments to show you, and you're... She gestured at him with one hand and shrugged, and he caught her sleeve. You are standing before me with some of the most delicately done embroidery I have ever seen. And I imagine you have even more wonderful creations at home, he said. Your accomplishments, your family estate, your family, your perseverance. Aren't you something you should dismiss? Everyone in Fresno knows you, so it's harder for them to see what you've built. To them, it's a given. To me, you're very impressive. She stared up at him, the dusk sky glittering in her eyes, and smiled. Thank you. You're very welcome. He nodded to the path, and they kept walking, her arm tucked into his. He didn't want to say anything that would ruin their relative peace, so he kept quiet. Ella fiddled with a loose thread on his sleeve. I didn't know how to write to you again and say hello without simply dumping all my problems at your feet, she whispered. You never did anything wrong. Everything was wrong. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about anything. I wouldn't have minded. I knew that. Deep down, said Ella, tying off the loose thread. My parents would have been disappointed in me for not answering you. I doubt that, he said softly. I may not have known what was happening at the time, but you were going through a lot, to put it lightly. My mother would have been disappointed in a few of my responses to you. August startled at the casual mention of his mother. He had feared what returning would be like emotionally, and yet he had just been able to think of her, without the usual stabbing pain in his chest that followed. I doubt that, Ella mimicked, and laughed softly, sadly, like she wasn't sure what else to do. I only remember the one letter that was not very nice. Had he not sent those others? That time felt like ages ago. Then I think we're both in the clear, said August. Can we stop avoiding each other? They reached the edge of town and the split in the road that would lead her home. Ella stopped first, slipping her hand from his arm, and turned to face him. August flexed his left hand. Yes, she said. I'm sorry. No more avoiding each other. August grinned. I can't convince you to let me walk you all the way home, can I? He asked, inexplicably bereft already. No, I'm afraid not, said Ella. Her arm twitched, and then she clasped her hands behind her back. You need to speak with Monsieur Readaloud? He nodded. Meet me in the market at dawn. I'll reintroduce you when I bring him my errand. His wife left for a while due to the stress of it all, and he's burying himself in his work. So he keeps earlier hours, she said. Does that work for you? Perfectly, he said, and inclined his head. She smiled, moving as though she wanted to embrace him, but wouldn't let herself. Dawn, then.